This review is for the audiobook I've just finished, Beneath the Surface, Killer Whales, SeaWorld and the Truth Beyond Blackfish. It's a paperback. As a paperback, it was published in 2016. Mine was an audio book and it was read by the author. The author is John Hargrove. He's an ex-SeaWorld employee, used to be a former senior trainer and swam with orcas and did all the things that SeaWorld does. So at this point, it's worth admitting that I have never actually seen Blackfish. I know what it is, of course. Blackfish, the documentary, has become part of world culture. We all know about it. And most of my friends have actually seen it. I don't own a television, so I don't see things on television. I either see them in the cinema or I probably don't get around to them. And by the time this had been in the cinema and gone on to CNN, most of the friends that I knew who had seen it found it too deeply traumatizing to want to rewatch it with me again. So I've never seen it, though I do know about it. The story is very, very compelling. I actually found myself choosing to listen to this audiobook over reading a real book, which is an unusual choice for me. John Hargrove, apparently as a young American child of, I'm thinking 7, but it could have been younger, went to one of the SeaWorlds, saw the orca show, was so heavily impressed that he basically dedicated his life to becoming an orca trainer, which he did at a fairly young age. And it sounds like he had something like a steady, almost meteoric rise. He dedicated his life to something that he loved, which was the orcas. Increasingly, though, he did not love SeaWorld and he did not always approve of their policies, and apparently he did become difficult to work with and outspoken about the conditions the orcas were being kept in and bred and other things, as anyone who loves an animal and watches it suffering should become outspoken. At the end of his career, he was matched up with some of the people who were producing Blackfish, and he did a series of interviews that he says SeaWorld wasn't aware of until after Blackfish aired at the Cannes Film Festival. I think having John himself do the narration was fascinating. He's not a natural narrator, and at times I found his accent difficult. There were certain words that he would say and I actually thought he was saying something else. Americans generally are easy for Australians to understand, but there's a few intonations there that I just struggled with. Despite that, I think his knowledge of his subject matter and his passion for it, the story itself, and for orcas in general, makes it well worth listening to him narrate it. I think the fascination of the story makes it more interesting to actually hear what he has to say about it, and his passion for the orcas comes through over and over again. I wasn't shocked or surprised by anything in this book. I've read a number of books about orcas, though mostly orcas in the wild. Like I say, Blackfish hit the world consciousness and is now part of it. Keeping any large marine mammal in captivity is something inherently wrong, and I've got a marine biology degree, so none of the things that he had to say were particularly surprising. I had heard about the dorsal fin problem, I'd heard about the water quality problems, I'd heard about a lot of this. It was fascinating hearing it from his point of view, and I really liked the personal journey element of how he was totally committed his life to becoming a trainer, including the physical exercise that you needed to be able to perform what is basically gymnastics in the water with a whale. Basically, anything that a normal human being would consider a life, he put on hold to make the orcas his life. And that level of passion for something is always going to be a fascinating story. I thought it was sad that he had to conceal his gender preferences from SeaWorld. I would imagine that has changed. I wouldn't imagine in this day and age that SeaWorld would actually prevent someone who is gay from becoming an employee, openly gay from becoming an employee. But this is a while ago. Hopefully they've changed for the better there. I have doubts that the quality of life for the animals has changed that much for a better, And the end of the book suggests that in 2016 at least, there wasn't as much change as you would hope from a multi-billionaire company. There's a lot that they could do that they haven't. I have read since that there are release programs and saltwater pools around the world, and that there are attempts to return cetaceans to the wild, or to the semi-wild, if not to the actual wild, that probably have occurred since this book was published. He talks about becoming part of the controversial documentary Blackfish, and basically speaking, as a book, this is not an environmental book, and it isn't an activist book in any way that I can see. This is a person's personal story towards living their passion, and the stories that he has about the individual whales and his connection with them are amazing. The stories of him swimming with the whales and performing those acrobatics are kind of thrilling, that they're heart-stopping. The idea of the things that they had to do. I mean, I'm old. My body would not cope with that sort of thing, but I don't think I've ever in my life been fit enough to do some of the things they have to do. So, yes, well, it is very much a condemnation of the American SeaWorlds, pointing out Gold Coast SeaWorld is not part of that organisation. Many people are surprised. They're different organisations. They do different things. America SeaWorld, not so good. Doesn't come out of this book so good. And the interviews and its interaction with the film Blackfish, also not so good. But that's really not what this book is about. Though he was exposing SeaWorld, that exposure is in the past. As a story of his experience with the working for SeaWorld, there's interesting parts to that. The whales, working with the whales, talking about the whales, the individual characters and their behaviours and their personalities, that's fascinating. And his connection to them is deeply, deeply fascinating, because any person who's that deeply connected with animals is something I'm always going to feel an affiliation with. Anyway, I thought it was great. Read it. If you're into audiobooks, I do think that the narration makes it a more personal experience between you and the author. I do recommend, did enjoy, would read more of if there were other good ones. Oh yes, YouTube wants you to like, comment and subscribe, etc., all that sort of thing. But if you're going to comment and you know another book that you think based on this book might be good, please do recommend it, because this isn't the kind of book that's normally on my to read shelf, and I enjoyed it thoroughly.